You've been told for years that the corporate ladder is a pure meritocracy, a beautifully designed hierarchy where the most technically competent, hardworking, and logically superior professionals naturally rise to the top. You think that when a leadership position opens up, the executives in the room run a clinical audit of everyone's historical output, calculate who possesses the sharpest analytical mind, and hand the title to the person who has sacrificed the most nights to the company grid. You believe that your exceptional work is an active, undeniable argument for your advancement. But it doesn't work like this. In the real world of institutional power, the system does not reward the worker who makes themselves an irreplaceable engine of daily production. It rewards the person who masterfully minimizes executive anxiety. While you are burning your cognitive reserves trying to prove you are the most intelligent executioner in the department, the promotion is quietly being funneled to someone whose technical output is entirely mediocre, but whose psychological alignment with leadership is completely flawless. You are treating the workplace like an academic institution where the highest grade wins the prize, while the corporate suite is playing a brutal game of social physics, risk deprecation, and political comfort. The uncomfortable truth is that promotions almost always seem to go to the wrong people, because you are measuring value with a metric that senior leadership doesn't care about, and until you change your lens, you will remain permanently trapped beneath a ceiling of your own high-performance making. Think about the quiet, toxic resentment that builds inside you as you watch this play out cycle after cycle. You have spent the last 12 months carrying the entire structural weight of your team. You are the one who stays up until midnight fixing the broken data architectures, rewriting the client-facing decks, and ensuring that when the critical quarterly deadline hits, your manager has a pristine, error-free narrative to present to the vice president. You possess twice the operational knowledge of anyone else in your department, and your peer execution reviews are mathematically flawless. Yet, when the director role is finally announced, you walk into the office only to discover that the title has been handed to a colleague who spends half their day wandering the floor, sharing casual sports anecdotes with the executive stakeholders, and delivering presentations that are completely empty of substantive analytical depth. You feel a sudden, exhausting wave of disillusionment and systemic unfairness. You did everything the corporate playbook told you to do, you kept your head down, you let your results speak for themselves, and yet you were passed over for a superficial charm merchant. You are left completely confused because you are viewing this decision as a catastrophic failure of corporate logic, while the executive suite views it as a perfectly rational, highly predictable optimization of their own social safety. The hidden truth behind why incompetence rises while technical excellence gets left behind is rooted in a psychological reality known as the irreplaceability trap. This is the part nobody tells you. The moment you make yourself completely indispensable to the daily tactical machinery of your department, you are actively writing the death warrant for your own promotion. Here's what actually happens. Your manager looks at the organizational grid and realizes that if they lift you into a strategic management role, the background engine you run will immediately collapse. They would have to spend months of unbudgeted time, resources, and cognitive energy trying to find 3 separate people just to replicate the massive output you deliver for a single baseline salary. The superficial colleague who doesn't hold any deep technical dependencies is a completely frictionless asset to move. Their departure from the trenches causes zero operational pain, making them the most liquid, highly mobile candidate on the board. This is the part where most people get stuck. They think that by increasing their execution capacity, they are proving they are ready to lead, but they aren't. In the eyes of senior leadership, a hyper-detailed producer is a tool to be preserved and exploited exactly where they are, while a promotion is a high-stakes gamble on organizational stability that has nothing to do with how fast you can type or how many spreadsheets you can audit. Deep office politics is completely governed by the management of perceived threat profiles. Human behavior within a corporate hierarchy is driven by 2 primal desires: the avoidance of political risk and the preservation of emotional comfort. When a senior executive sits in a closed-door calibration session to select a new leader, they are not looking for a brilliant iconoclast who is going to challenge their operational assumptions, demand sweeping cultural changes, or make them feel intellectually insecure during a weekly briefing. They are looking for predictability. The technically brilliant employee who constantly points out systemic flaws, pushes back on illogical timelines, and displays an intense, anxious desire to optimize everything is viewed by leadership as a highly volatile risk. They are a loose cannon who might embarrass the director in front of the board. The superficial operator, however, understands that corporate survival is an ongoing exercise in impression management. They match the executive's behavioral cadence, they absorb stress without projecting anxiety back onto the hierarchy, and they master the art of non-threatening competence. They look like a leader because they have systematically eliminated all psychological friction between themselves and the decision makers, rendering themselves the safest, most comforting option available. And this is where the massive reality shift must completely reframe your approach to your career. Your current strategy of aggressive performance is the exact mechanism that is keeping you permanently stranded in the execution layer. You must stop treating your hard work as a shield to avoid the uncomfortable realities of organizational social dynamics. You believe that engaging in visibility management or building strategic relationships is a cheap, dirty form of manipulation that diminishes the purity of your merit, but that pride is precisely why you are losing to people with half your intellect. In the corporate ecosystem, a professional who relies solely on their output is completely invisible as a human being. They are simply a high-yielding node on a network spreadsheet. This is the turning point where you stop acting like an angry student complaining that the teacher has a favorite, and start executing like a cold, detached strategist who understands that perception is reality inside the corporate matrix, and that visibility without a political anchor is nothing more than hyper-efficient exploitation. The first subtle solution to breaking this cycle requires you to immediately implement the principle of strategic capacity under-reporting. You must systematically dismantle the expectation that you are a bottomless pit of execution capacity. If you continue to absorb every piece of low-value administrative work that your manager throws at your desk, you will never have the cognitive surface area required to project executive presence. When a new task enters your domain, you do not execute it instantly in a frantic bid for approval. You slow down the delivery timeline, and you introduce structural boundaries. You frame your capacity not as a limitation of your will, but as a deliberate defense of your strategic focus. You say, I can absolutely integrate this operational audit into my schedule, but to ensure that our high-visibility regional delivery narrative maintains its current trajectory for the VP's review, we will need to reroute the secondary maintenance tasks to the wider team. You are forcing your manager to consciously calculate the cost of your time. You are subtly training them to stop viewing you as an all-purpose workhorse and start viewing you as a finite, highly strategic resource whose time must be respected and protected. Your communication model must simultaneously shift away from technical reporting and transition entirely toward executive translation. This is the part nobody tells you. Senior leaders do not think in terms of lines of code, database schemas, or manual processing steps. They think exclusively in terms of risk mitigation, revenue preservation, and resource optimization. When you speak to a manager or an internal stakeholder, you must completely strip your vocabulary of the granular, technical jargon that you use to solve problems in the trenches. If you explain a project failure by detailing a technical exception in the background software, you sound like a mechanic, not a driver. Instead, you translate the technical reality into an executive metric. You don't say, the API broke because of a server mismatch. You say, we experienced a temporary data alignment lag that threatened our Q3 delivery timeline by 4 days, but I've already implemented an automated structural bridge that insulates our primary client portfolio from any downstream variance. You are demonstrating that you possess the exact linguistic architecture required for the next tier of leadership. You are proving that you can sit in an executive boardroom and discuss operational failures without causing panic or requiring a technical interpreter. Visibility within this new strategic framework must focus heavily on the cultivation of lateral social currency. One of the primary reasons the superficial person gets promoted over the high-performing technician is that they are known, liked, and trusted by the directors of adjacent departments. When your name is brought up in a promotional calibration meeting, your direct manager is not the only person who dictates your fate. The leaders of sales, marketing, and finance all have a vote. If those lateral directors have never seen your face, or if their only interaction with you is a cold, hyper-analytical email demanding a data correction, they will instantly vote against your advancement to protect their own teams from what they perceive as a rigid, uncollaborative technician. You break this barrier by consciously exiting your execution bubble and building informal bridges across the organization. You schedule brief, casual 15-minute alignment syncs with lateral leaders, framing the conversation entirely around understanding their departmental headaches. You ask them, what is our team currently delivering that introduces the most friction into your weekly workflows? You don't do this to take on more work. You do it to build an unshakable reputation as a collaborative, highly approachable statesman. When the executive board evaluates your promotional file, the adjacent directors won't see a faceless workhorse. They will see a trusted ally whose advancement guarantees smooth, cross-functional cooperation. Relationships with your current leadership team must be guided by the law of reflected sovereignty. You must completely eliminate any trace of intellectual arrogance or quiet resentment from your daily interactions with management. Insecure leaders possess a hypersensitive radar for direct reports who secretly think they are smarter than their bosses, and the moment they detect a hint of condescension or passive-aggressive resistance, they will systematically lock you out of the inner circle. You counter this by mastering the art of non-threatening competence. You never correct your manager in a public briefing to look sharp. You never expose their strategic blind spots in front of their own superiors. Instead, you treat their ideas with absolute institutional respect, while privately using precise, data-backed questions to guide them away from catastrophic errors. You allow them to take your highly analytical insights, present them to the vice president as their own, and claim the glory. You do this not out of submissive weakness, but out of a calculated, cold understanding of human leverage. The moment a manager realizes that your presence is the primary engine making them look like a genius to the executive board, they will become intensely, desperately committed to pulling you up the ladder alongside them, because your advancement directly solidifies their own corporate security. Your ultimate strategy requires the systematic transition from an execution blueprint to a conceptual architecture. You must consciously stop being the person who does the work and start being the person who designs the framework within which the work gets done. When an ambiguous, highly chaotic problem enters the department, something your manager doesn't have the time or cognitive energy to properly structure, you must step into the vacuum immediately. You do not wait for a formal assignment. You take the raw chaos, apply a clean, structured operational roadmap to it, and present it as a finished, ready-to-execute strategy. You say, "I've mapped out our structural approach for the upcoming integration. Here is the timeline, the resource allocation matrix, and the specific risk mitigation triggers we need to authorize." You are demonstrating executive presence before the title or the salary adjustment even exists. You are forcing the leadership team to look at you and realize that keeping you in the execution trenches is a profound misuse of an operator who is already functionally running the conceptual layer of the department. Here's what actually happens when you execute this psychological framework with absolute, unyielding consistency over a multi-month period. The formal promotion process stops being a source of bitter, exhausting anxiety for you because you have successfully rewritten the behavioral code that the executive suite evaluates. Long before the HR calibration windows ever open, your advancement has already become an absolute political inevitability. Your manager has already defended your upcoming promotion to their own superiors, using your lateral praise, your executive communication style, and your low-maintenance strategic stability to build an unassailable case for your elevation. To the rest of the office, your sudden rise will look like a stroke of luck or the natural result of an objective performance audit. Your former peers will look at the announcement email and say, "Wow, they must have really liked their numbers this quarter." But they completely miss the point. They don't see the silent, deliberate architecture of behavioral calibration, boundary management, and risk mitigation that you spent the last 2 quarters embedding into the collective subconscious of the leadership floor.